Looking to the north, all the summits of the Mamors, Ben Nevis and the Grey Corries and beyond come into view. Between Aonach and Aonach there's an entrance exam to pass. Only a few yards past the summit of Aonach there's an abrupt 20-metre vertical drop. The erosion shows that thousands of people have walked right up to the edge before finding the easier way down to the right. There is no shortage of good holds on this descent, but even when dry these rocks can be slippy due to the polishing effect of all the traffic this ridge has seen. This first problem is like an entrance exam, because if you pass this without any trouble, you should be able to enjoy the rest of the ridge. On the other hand, if this descent gives you flashbacks to childhood, panic attacks, or you feel the need for a cuddle, continuing past Aonach could be a really bad idea. The summit of Aonach gives the first good view of the difficult sections ahead. The summits of Stobcorylay and Sgurr nan Fianna can be seen in the background on the right. Just to the right of centre, casting a shadow to the north, is the crux of the ridge, the Crazy Pinnacles. This first chimney is a good introduction to the ridge. The hardest moves are right at the bottom. In places it's as hard as anything else on the ridge, and although it's usually wet due to the shade, the rock is quite sound and there is little or no exposure. Having holes on three sides does help. The Aonach Eagach is the scene of a great many accidents every year. Part of the reason for this is that the ridge joins two Munros, and hence attracts thousands of Munro baggers and hill walkers who would not otherwise pit themselves against such a hard scramble. Another factor is that the ridge is inescapable. Despite appearances, there are no safe paths off either side. Once committed to the ridge, you have only two options: complete the traverse or go back to the start. Unfortunately, this is especially true in the difficult midsection, where it's most likely that someone will want to escape. The sides of the ridge are a maze of gullies and steep scree, all of which end in cliffs. It might seem hard to believe, but completing the ridge or going back to the start are the easiest and safest options. Here, because of the way the rocks lie, the surface is smooth and the footholds slope outwards. Crossing this first ledge is all very well on a dry sunny day, but it would be quite unnerving to try this in the wet. The scrambling obstacles you will be faced with are generally 10 metres in height, with a short walk in between. This dilutes the difficulty into manageable chunks, and the walking sections between give you time to recover and remind yourself why you came. There are a few places of real exposure on this ridge, where a trip and fall to either side would be unthinkable. A head for heights and good balance are called for. When climbing down, facing out can give better visibility of the holds below. However, on steep sections, a rucksack gets in the way. Facing into the rock is more secure. At the top of this slope the crazy pinnacles come into view. Talking of crazy, I have no idea what this man was trying with the tape. Perhaps there was a fiver on the end. The ridge is narrow enough in places that passing people coming the other way, or passing slower people, is impossible. Fortunately, this lad disappeared. At the low point ahead, the ridge narrows to a knife edge. Security is better than style though, so if in doubt, you can climb à cheval, where you sit down with a leg on either side and shuffle along. Some parts of the Aonach Eagach are exposed. Some are slippy, some involve hard scrambling, and in some parts the rock is not to be trusted. Usually these elements do not all appear together. The exception to this is the Crazy Pinnacles, the crux of the climb. Before starting on the Crazy Pinnacles, it's worth taking a moment to compose yourself. The first move through the cleft is very tricky indeed because of a lack of any convincing footholds. Smaller people will find this move easier facing into the rock. There is a path, visible on the right, which attempts to avoid the Crazy Pinnacles to the north. This is the proverbial slippery slope. The further it goes, the steeper it gets. There are a couple of places where branches of the path attempt to regain the ridge, but these end up in sheer drops. For all the difficulties of the pinnacles, the path is worse. When I had my arms wrapped around one of the smaller pinnacles, I had the very disturbing impression that pulling too hard would have ended with the pair of us waltzing down the mountain together. So if you find climbing over the pinnacles a bit too awkward, a good shove should clear them away. While climbing along the pinnacles, I found that even some of the polished holds were loose. I was tempted to take them home. From these slabby rocks, after the smaller pinnacles, a direct ascent can be made to the crest of the ridge for those immune to exposure. Alternatively, a longer but easier scramble lies to the right. The only caveat is that this route lies on the north side, so the rocks are more likely to be wet, being in the shade. The final pinnacle is a fine place for a moment's relief and look back on the day's achievements. This is not the end of the scrambling, but the worst is past. It's also a good vantage point to watch as people perform an 8-some reel through, round, over and under the pinnacles. After the pinnacles, the ridge drops off abruptly to the col before Stobcorrie Lea. The path is indeed very steep over this section, so care is still required, but it's technically much easier than the previous section. The final obstacle looks very intimidating on approach. Again, only the first couple of moves pose much of a challenge. This is one of the few obstacles which can be avoided by a path to the north.